Welcome to the SuperAbundant Life podcast, where we teach the Bible in a simple, authentic, and practical way so that Christians can skillfully apply the Word of God to create supernatural results in every area of life. This is your host, Olawunmi Brigue. I'm the kind of person that is a visionary. I tend to always look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years in advance. I live more. I live more in the future than I live in the present because of my personality. That is just the way I'm wired. So it takes deliberate effort for me to actually live in the present. So as a result of that, it was very difficult for me to actually stick with one thing and see through to a good completion before something else catches my attention or there's another fire that needs to be put out, etc. So I've lived this, all right? With the help of God, to a certain degree, I've been able to overcome this firefighter mentality, and I'm hoping that by sharing what I know about this today, that it will also help you, and it will go a long way in helping you and teaching you to live a different way. Because to be honest with you, being a firefighter, and I'll go into all this in detail in a minute, is a very unproductive way to live. It is. And you don't have to be like that. You don't have to say, well, that's who I am, that's who I am. No, we're supposed to keep growing in Christ, right? And we can actually break this cycle. It's very simple. I'm going to be showing you how to do that. You can break this cycle by simply taking a more strategic approach to solving problems that you encounter at work and in your life. Okay, it doesn't always have to be fly by the seat of your pants. It doesn't always have to be, oh, there's a fire, boom, going on there, let's go and direct all our resources. Oh, okay, we've put that out. Okay, before you even, let's say, right, how do we prevent this fire from happening again? There's another fire, boom, that's not it. So you keep jumping from thing to thing, from project to project, from one area of your life to another, without really taking an area of your life and making sure that it is superbly prosperous the way God would have you do. And in my mentoring program, SuperAbundant Woman, that is actually the I was going to say the philosophy. I guess I can use that word. That's that's the only word that's coming to me now, actually. That's the philosophy behind Soul. That's a vision. Maybe I should say vision. Vision sounds better than philosophy. Behind Soul, it is essentially we don't neglect any area of our lives, and we don't do all areas of our lives at the same time. So over the course of a year, we take one area per time, and we try and go deep into it. We try and do things to help us set us up for success in that one area, being absolutely focused. Then you move on to the next and the next and the next. I found that to be very, very effective and a much more productive way to live in general. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the firefighter mentality. Trust me, you do not want to live your life in that firefighting zone. Okay, so let me explain in more detail what I mean by the firefighter mentality. As you heard in the intro, it is essentially where things keep popping up, right? It's like a conveyor belt. And the truth of the matter is, you will always have problems to solve. You always have crises. You always have things that need your attention and things that will demand your attention. So something happened at work, something happened at department, something happened here. There will always be something. Why? Because we live multi-dimensional lives. If it's not at work, it is the marriage. If it's not in the marriage, it is the children. If it's not the children, it is the finances. If it's not the finances, it is the parents that are saying, you don't call me. And so there's always stuff going on, because we live such multi-dimensional lives. Now, where it becomes a problem is if everything is vying for your attention. As a result of that, you're sort of hopping from thing to thing without really digging deep into anything. So you are like operating at surface level for pretty much everything in your life. Everything is at surface level. So yes, your kids are not running haywire, right? They're doing okay at school. It's like you're not, really saying, okay, the 6 months of this year or 3 months of this year, I'm just going to go all out and focus on my kids and make sure they have the routines, they have the grounding, etc., etc. Or I'm going to take time and just focus on my finances and just make sure that we set everything up. And once it begins to run on autopilot, then you can go to something else. So you never really dig deep to resolve something and bring it to a good conclusion. It's always been dealt with at the surface level. So you move from one major outbreak, you're dealing with this one. Once it calms down a little bit, mind you, it hasn't been completely resolved. You've just sort of taken the pressure off a little bit. That thing is still simmering. It's like a fire, isn't it? So it's still simmering under the surface, and the time is coming when it's going to explode again. So you go from major outbreak to major outbreak, and you respond to each one with high energy. But as soon as the fire is out, as soon as it simmers a little bit, never mind that you haven't completely put it out, right? It's still sort of, it's only a matter of time before the wind blows it again and boom, there's an explosion again. But as soon as the urgency is gone, you abandon it and you move on to the next one, even though you know within your heart that this thing is still a problem. I haven't resolved this problem. I've only just moved on to something that is more urgent. So essentially, what are you doing? You keep hacking off the leaves while you are leaving the roots intact. So imagine, I'll give you an example actually. Last summer, I think it was last summer. So last year, or early this year, I think it must have been last year. So a year ago, there's a beautiful willow tree near my house on our close, and it's, oh my goodness, as it makes the close. It's like a cul-de-sac, and the tree being there just makes everything beautiful. As in, everyone that comes loves the tree. It's just so stunning. And there was one very fierce demonic wind that came and just literally sliced that tree in two. And we literally woke up one day, I looked out my kitchen window, oh my God, what's happened to this tree? And the thing was, obviously bent over, etc. And so the tree surgeons had to come, and they basically just chopped everything off and cut it down. And I was like, as I saw it, I prayed for that tree. I said, no, you must not die. I said, you must not die. Okay. Now, I'm not saying it's my prayer, and I'm not saying it's not my prayer. That's not the point. I know my prayer had an effect because it always does, but that's not the point I'm making. The point is, when you looked at this tree, people that came to visit later on, that, oh, that beautiful tree, what happened? I said, oh, it's one wind that came and just came and destroyed that tree, etc., etc. People were like, oh, that tree was so nice. But somehow, I knew that tree was going to come back. Why? Because it was still rooted. It was still rooted. It was in the ground. It was connected to the earth. It had access to sunlight. It had access to water, to nutrients. The root was in the ground, and true. A year later, that tree is alive. It is well. It is blossoming again. In fact, it's where Maxine and I go and take pictures sometimes because it's just so beautiful. So if you want to take pictures outside, we go and stand under the tree, and it's back. The tree is back. So that's what I'm saying. So you may hack away at the leaves, at the effect of the symptoms, right? But within yourself that thing is still rooted, and therefore it's going to come back. It's going to come back. Let me give you an example. So someone knows that their financial situation is, if I can use the word, very sick. It's not well. Things are not right? Things are not, you sort of know that every now and then a crisis pops up. So let's say there are urgent bills, like the mortgage has to be paid by the end of the month, the rent is coming due by the end of the month, or whatever it is, or the school fees, or whatever it is. And leading up to that, you're like hyperventilating, and you're running around, you're making sure everything is done, blah blah blah. And at the last minute, you pray, you push, you fast, you do everything, you pay the bill, right? And you're like, but you know that is not the end of that problem. You have dealt with it on the surface. You have removed the urgency of it, but you know it's still simmering and there's an explosion coming up again. So it might not be the next month where the mortgage or the rent is due again. It might be 3 months down the line where there you go, there's another thing and then you can't pay again. That's what I mean. Or for example, in someone's marriage, they know that the root of this marriage, there's something wrong. It's not quite right. Right? But you only ever talk about it when there are arguments. When katakata bursts, as we say in Nigeria, you wait until katakata bursts, and then when that happens, the shouting, the arguing, that you always do this, you always do that, then you talk about it, and they're like, okay, fine, sorry. And you sort of, go back to normal, but you know that it is only a matter of time before something else happens, because you haven't really taken the time to say, okay, let's sit down and let us really dig deep and try and bring this situation before God and let him heal us and teach us what we ought to do. So you haven't really taken that step. Okay, that is what I mean by the firefighter mentality. And the thing of it is, if someone has that kind of mentality, you would just literally find yourself drained most of the time, right? Why shouldn't you have a firefighter mentality? Because someone might say, well, if fires crop up, I will just fight it and deal with it and then just move on to the next one. But no, it actually ends up being a lot of wasted energy without really truly achieving anything great at the end of the day. So if someone has a firefighter mentality, they're always on the go. All right, they're always doing something. Always. If you look at their calendar, it is always full. But if you look at their level of productivity, it is usually very low. So low to medium. Now, if they put all that effort into actually being strategic in their problem solving, their productivity will be off the charts. So it leads to burnout, right? Number one, it leads to burnout. Right? Someone that has that kind of mentality where you're just going from things to things, because things will always come up. And as I will show you later on in the podcast, it is not even every fire that you're supposed to put out. Not every fire deserves your attention, because even if you do that, it will create more problems in the long run. So number one, it leads to burnout. Number two, if you're the kind of leader, and we're all leaders, right? Whether it is at work, whether it is your children that you're leading, whatever it is. If you are the kind of leader that has a firefighter mentality, your team will be underdeveloped. Because you're always doing everything. You're the one that wants to do everything. You're the one that must, sit in every meeting. You're the one that must, make sure that blah, 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 and all that. So you want to be the one to do everything. If there's a problem that comes up, you don't delegate. You don't allow people bring their own ideas to the table. It doesn't mean that you are aloof and you never know what's going on. Obviously, you need to have oversight. But I'm talking about where you take ownership for everything that comes your way, that comes the way of your team. Your people will not ever develop their muscles. It's like doing everything for a child. If you do everything for a child, you're literally crippling that child for life and for the affairs of life. So number one, it leads to burnout. Number two, your team, your children, whoever it is that you're leading will be underdeveloped. Number three, the third reason why you shouldn't have a firefighter mentality is this. There are certain fires, right, that could be hiding a bigger fire that should have captured your interest instead. So, you see, I'm just going to leave that there because I talk in much more detail about it later on. Alright, let me just use a very simple example of what I just mentioned, bailing a child out. So the child, for example, I've shared this on the podcast before. My son at a point kept forgetting things. He was very disorganized. So rather than fight those fires, I just decided, listen, I'm going to step back. I'm not going to fight the fire, because I knew that even though it might look as if I'm being an irresponsible mother because the school kept calling me and say, yeah, he didn't have this, he didn't have that. And it looked as if I was being irresponsible. I was like, I'm not fighting that fire, because I understood that if I kept putting out those fires, then he would never learn to become organized. So there was a more serious problem down the line, that if I kept putting out that fire for him, there's a bigger consequence coming up, where his own disorganization was going to cause me a bigger fire. So I would rather leave the small fires now, so that the bigger fire never happens. So that's what I mean by that. Okay, so I've showed you what I mean by the firefighter mentality, why you should not have a firefighter mentality. And before I move on to the positive side of this, let me just read out some of the symptoms of the firefighter mentality, just so that you can really identify yourself in this, right? If you're that kind of person, all right? You could be someone that you may have identified that you were like that, but then you've now worked on yourself and you're now more inclined to be more strategic. Or you could be like, I've always been strategic, whatever it is. Hopefully, at least part of this will be a blessing to you. So what are the symptoms? I'm just going to read out. There's several, but there are 4 key ones that if you can locate yourself in any of these things, then you probably need to listen carefully to what I have to say today, because I've been there and it is not a very nice way to live. Okay, it is very frustrating, because it will be like putting money in a bag full of holes, as the Bible says, or pouring water into a basket. You'll be expending a lot of energy, but not much to show for it at the end of the day. Number 1, the first symptom of the firefighter mentality is that you never seem to have enough time or resources to handle the problems that pop up in your environment. That means you're doing too much. Because God gave you 24 hours, He gave me 24 hours, He gave everybody the same amount of time. And He said, I will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear. So if you constantly find yourself being overwhelmed, it means there are certain problems that you have no business going after. That's number 1. So if you're always rushed off your feet, it means you're carrying other people's load on top of your own. You need to say, as we say in Yoruba, eleru, do what? Beru. Carry your load. I tell my children, I say it all the time. I say, carry your load. It's not my business. That is your fire to deal with. You go and deal with it. Oh, Mom, I forgot this. Do what? So if you feel constantly rushed off your feet, constantly overwhelmed, constantly feel like you're doing too much, that is because you are what? Doing too much. Number 2, second symptom of the firefighter mentality, you tend to leave things half done. You're not the kind of person, and this one requires brutal honesty. Yes, if you look back and all you see are a string of half-finished projects, and this could also be in employment. So you go to a workplace and you start there, you start very excited, and then something happens and you're like, oh, and then do you understand? It's like you have a dream to progress, to do something, but maybe a quarter of the way through, you just like, okay, the excitement is gone or whatever it is, and you can't really find yourself pushing to get to what you truly want to achieve. So if you tend to leave things half done, right? Problems are patched rather than solved. I've talked about that. The superficial effects are dealt with rather than the underlying causes being dealt with or fixed. That means you probably have a firefighter mentality. The third one is, if you find that problems keep popping back up, they keep recurring and maybe even coming back stronger or worse, you probably have a firefighter mentality, simply because of point number 2. Because when the problems popped up the first time, you didn't really take the time to go deep. You just sort of dealt with it at the peripheral, at the surface. And then once all the emotions had died down, once it was no longer like, oh my God, what's going on? Things are sort of calm a little bit again. You leave it until the next high energy thing comes up and you start running around again. right? So if you find that things keep happening, so finance is always been an issue for the last 5 years, 10 years, it is, you have a firefighter mentality, okay? And the fourth symptom is if you always or habitually, let me say habitually, find yourself choosing urgency over importance. So if you look at your calendar, go and look at your calendar. What is your calendar full of? And when I say urgency, it doesn't necessarily mean that you think it's urgent. It might be other people that think it's urgent. They push it on you. You don't want to say no and you go ahead with it anyway. You don't want to let people down. But you know this thing is not adding to your destiny. As we used to say back in life, is this thing adding to your destiny? No, don't do it then. Right? It might be important to someone else, right? And they may try and push it off on you as being urgent, as in you have to do it. You don't want to say no, you take it on, but you know that within you, you really don't want to do that thing. You know that it's not really developing you. It's not really adding to your own life, right? And, I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember which one, but someone made a statement that, oh my God, hit me so hard. I remember the one now. Hit me so hard, I will never forget it. What he said. This was an 80-year-old man that was being interviewed, and he was casting his eye back over his life and everything, and he was asked about how he spent his time and balancing family with work, a very successful person in his field. And he said he found out one thing, that the only way he could really prioritize his family and then next his work, etc., was whenever someone brought an idea or someone brought something for him to do, right? And if he knew within himself that, quote and unquote, it didn't add to his destiny, it wasn't something that was going to move him forward, it wasn't something that he wanted to do or needed to do, he was going to steal the time from something else that was more important to him or to his family or to his work, etc. But because he was naturally a people pleaser, he always found it difficult to say no to people. But he realized one thing, that I can't keep saying no. So do you know what he said? He said this is what he would tell the person. He said, I would love to help you, right? Left to me, listen, this is what I do. I love helping people. However, number one, this for me is not something that I'm meant to be investing my time and my resources into in this season of my life, number one. And number two, because I'm not the right person to do it for you. I can't do it as good or as well as the right person that you're actually meant to take it to. And that just blew my mind. That you know that you're actually doing people a service when you say to them, when they bring you stuff to do and you know within yourself that you're not supposed to do it. If you have a problem with saying no to people, think of it this way, that if you do it, you might commit yourself and do it well, but compare that to someone that was actually meant to do it in the first place. They will blow that thing out of the park. They will be much more excellent in the way they do it compared to you. So by saying no to that person, it is actually an opportunity for them to truly find the right person that's supposed to do it and take it to a level that you would never have been able to take it to, simply because you are not the right person to do it. Okay? So choosing urgency or people's demands or whatever it is over what you know to be important. Okay, I'm taking this in different stages, step by step. And the next thing that I want to talk about is, why do we actually do it? Why do we tend to have this firefighting mentality when it comes to problem solving? I mean, from everything I have read out so far, you'll be like, why am I even a firefighter self? Why do I behave this way? Right? But the truth of the matter is, nobody wants to be a certain kind of way. All right, there's certain things that lure us into behaving that way for something that is negative. And so what are the lures? Why do we end up being firefighters or adopting a firefighter mentality or approach towards life? The first reason is that there's a sense of, it comes with a sense of significance, all right, or approval, the feeling of being needed. The feeling of being needed. Yeah? if you're always fighting fires, and this relates not just to yourself, but if you're the kind of person that is always fighting people, putting out other people's fires, there's a sense of significance knowing that, oh, I'm the one that helped this person, I'm the one that helped that person, I'm the one that helped that person, I'm the one that helped that person. It's good to help people. God calls us to help people, but you are not called to help everybody. So you also have to check your own motive. When you keep saying yes and putting out all these fires and volunteering for everything and say, I'll do it, you have to check your motive and say, why am I really doing this? Am I doing this because I believe genuinely that I'm supposed to be the person to do this? Or is there some kind of approval that I'm looking for from people, that by doing it for them, they will approve of me, and that is sort of filling some kind of void inside me? You have to be, there's a very thin line between being a generous person and being somebody that is always seeking people's approval, and as a result of that, they keep doing stuff for people. Okay, so there's a sense of significance or approval that comes with always being the hero, the firefighter that comes in and solves the problem, and people clap, and then, do you understand? But if the fires you're fighting do not actually contribute to your own purpose, if you keep leaving your own lane to go off into the sidelines to go and fight fires, do you know what's happening? You're actually delaying your own purpose, the fulfillment of what God has truly called you to do. So there's a sense of significance and approval, a feeling of of being needed, that people need you. Oh, my children need me. I've heard, people say, like my colleagues or whatever, when I was working, how maybe those are when they're 40s or something, and their kids go to university or something, they leave home and they're like, I feel so useless. I'm like, why are you feeling useless? This is your time. You don't have to do school runs, you don't have to be, do you understand? This is your time. Enjoy your time, enjoy your life. No kids to worry about. In fact, the conversation now is, just be gisting and just literally being friends with them at this beautiful stage. And at that stage, me, I was probably in my 20s, and now they'll be telling me, oh, the kids have left home and the nest is empty and I feel so useless. And basically what they're saying is they derived their own sense of identity or significance from doing stuff for their children. And now that their children were gone, they felt like, who am I? If I'm not a mother, who am I? If I'm not a father, who am I? No, we do stuff for our kids, but we don't do it to feed the void in our own heart. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to, the reason why we fight fires is you don't either want to be seen as being irresponsible, whether by people or by yourself. So there's an emotional satisfaction that comes from knowing that at least I'm doing something. I gave the example of my son when he was always forgetting stuff. And after a while, I started saying, you can, whatever the school might say, you will bear the consequence of whatever it is, right? Now, people might look at me and say, you're not helping him, blah, 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 and all those things. Do you understand? The emotional satisfaction to say, well, I know that the problem is not particularly being solved, but at least I'm doing something. The running around, expending energy, just so that people can see that you are doing something, or you can appease your own conscience to say that you are doing something. That is one of the very powerful reasons or lures for us to be firefighters. I'm doing something, but you know that the doing something that you're doing is not really solving the problem. It's just giving you an emotional satisfaction, like at least I'm not just sitting down. Yeah. The third one is, I alluded to this, is response to pressure or judgment from people. So we firefight simply because there are people watching. They pressure us, or they may, you want to avoid judgment from people. As a result of that, you go around fighting fires rather than some fires just letting them burn. Okay, so let's take this a little bit deeper now. So I've talked about what firefighting is, or the firefighter mentality, what lures us into it, what are the symptoms, what are the effects of living life with the firefighter mentality. So I'm now going to go on to the other half of today's episode, where I'm going to talk about, number one, what should it really look like? right? What should be our approach to problem solving, to dealing with the issues that pop up in our lives? How should we really approach it? Number one. And then number two, I would talk about how to actually break the cycle. How do you break the cycle? How do you become someone that is strategic rather than emotional or knee jerky? That's not a word, but that's the only thing I think of at the moment. To be strategic rather than knee jerky in your approach to solving problems. So what should it really look like? What should life look like? Now, it's interesting that I've used the firefighting analogy, right? And like I said, okay, maybe I didn't say, maybe I just said it in my head, right? The firefighter mentality is not something that I made up, okay? It's actually a term. It's a leadership term, right? So when leaders firefight, I've described what that looks like. They jump from crisis to crisis and never really look at the bottom line and how to grow long term, okay? So it's a leadership term, and it might even be a psychology term. I'm not sure about that, right? But the interesting thing about it is we are using firefighters as an example. And you only ever see firefighters when there's a fire, right? That's when you see them. But did you actually know? When I saw this, I was like, wow. Did you know that firefighters are more strategic in their approach to firefighting than knee-jerky? Okay, bear with me. I'm going to keep using that word because I can't momentarily think of a better word, even though it's not a word. Okay, firefighters, they are strategic. Do you know, and I read the statistics, and it says that, did you know that professional firefighters spend about 10%, only about 10% of their actual shifts fighting fires? Only about 10%. So it's not like a firefighter goes to work and all day, every day, they are fighting fires. As they come back, the thing goes one again, and then they rush out again. And then, no. It says professional, that is the good ones. Oh, it said professional firefighters only spend about 10%. What do they use the other 90% to do? How do they spend the rest of their 90%, the rest of their time, the 90%? It says that they spend that time, 90% of the time, training themselves and others on prevention of fires. They spend it strategizing and preparing to fight fires effectively, so that when the time came to fight the fire, they were ready, they were skillful, they were excellent at it, and they did it well. So do you know what that is telling me? This is actually how we should approach life, right? We should not be going from crisis to crisis to crisis. That is an abnormal way of living. Honestly, it is. It is. All these fly by the seat of your pants. As you are dealing with this one, another one pops up. And then as you deal with that one, another one pops up. That is not normal. It's not normal. It's not good for your mental health to always be at high alert, high energy, and like emotionally strung out all the time. It's not good. The normal state of a Christian, as I always say on this podcast, as the Bible teaches us, is peace and joy. That is where you're supposed to be 90% of the time. If I use the analogy of these firefighters, then maybe 10% of the time, something pops up in your environment that goes, whoa, what is this? And you assign your resources. Then that is when it's okay to defer your resources. You borrow resources from here, you borrow time from here, you borrow money from here. Do you understand? I don't mean borrow money from people. But for example, if, God forbid, somebody's health, something happens with their health, they might take money from their savings to divert it towards health and pause whatever they're doing with investment and say, listen, health is more important. That's what I mean by that. So you borrow time, you borrow money, you borrow this to divert it. But imagine if you're doing that 99% of the time as opposed to 10%. So when things sort of punctuate that peace and joy, we're supposed to very quickly get back to a place where we are in peace and joy again. That's how it's supposed to be. That is how God designed our life to be. That is how exactly it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to always be managing crises. No, it's not normal. It's not right. There's no peace. Something is always happening. If it's not the husband that we're fighting at home, it is the rent is due, it is mortgage is due, it is I can't pay this one. If it's not that one, it is this one. If it's not this one, it is stress at work. My boss is doing this, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not normal. So professional firefighters, they only spend 10% of the time fighting fires. So that is where I want you to get to the point where only like every now and then something big comes up and you're like, okay. So that way you have the time, you have the headspace to be able to say, okay, I'm going to really face this fire and not just put it out and leave it simmering under the surface. I'm going to stay with it and dig deep and really take it down and know that, okay, I've brought it to the point where, okay, things are genuinely fine. I have cut off the roots. And even though the effects may still be obvious, but I have dealt with the roots and it's only a matter of time before it completely dies out. That is how we're supposed to approach life. That is the norm. That is the standard as Christians, as sons of the Most High God. Okay? So finally now, I'm going to be talking about how can you be more strategic in your approach to solving problems? How can you get to the point where it is only about 10% of your life that you spend attending to problems or crises, right? Only 10%. The remaining 90%, you have time, you have the headspace to build. For example, Nehemiah, the Bible talks about Nehemiah went back to go and build the wall of Jerusalem, right? When he got there, some people rose up against him. They were trying to dissuade him, blah, 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 right? But it says that there was only a portion of time when they held, they were at high alert because the enemy was coming to come and stop them from building that wall, and they knew that war or a battle could break out at any time. But it wasn't all the time. There was a time where they were free to build the wall and everything was fine. That's what I'm trying to say. So we shouldn't always be at high alert, like you're always like crisis, right? So if you follow this advice, and these are the things that I have learned over the years, because I started this podcast by saying and being absolutely truthful that this is how I used to live my life, because I would never really go deep with anything, because I'm always like, okay, let's do that one, okay, let's do that one, okay, I'm doing that one. And I had so many unfinished things in my life. God just pulled my ear one day and said, sit down, okay, what is all this? Like, no. And then it was years ago. Since then, the phrase came to me. I think I even saw it on someone's t-shirt. Like, I'm talking probably 12, 13 years ago. Okay, I have started, so I will finish. No, the t-shirt said I have started, so I will finish. I added strong to it. So I have started, so I will finish strong. And I've been using that phrase as my signature, right, for 12, 13 years, and it became what regulates my life. So if you are going to do something, don't start it if you know you are not going to finish strong. So, okay, I'm going to share with you how you can be more strategic in your problem solving, and if you keep gradually applying these things that I'm going to share with you, you will gradually, draw close to the point where 90% building, 10% attending to crisis or fighting off an enemy or something, right? 90% building. Imagine building for 90% of the time. Imagine how far you would go compared to if you're fighting off the enemy 90% of the time and you're only building 10% of the time. Okay? So number one, the first one, I think I have 1, 2, 3, I think I have 4. I have 3 or 4 strategies for you. Ways to become more strategic in your approach to problem solving. The first one is this. Okay, something pops up, boom. And listen, if you're in a position where 90% or 80% or 70% of your time at the moment is spent, solving problem. One problem pops up, one problem, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you can start from where you are. Okay, now the first thing is carefully assess the situation. So something pops up in your environment. So let's say, for example, something pops up Okay, I don't want to name, actually, I just got a check now. Not to name an area, because I don't want to trivialize any area, because the person listening to me, you listening to me, that might be the area that you're supposed to focus on. But if I trivialize it, it might sound like, oh, maybe I shouldn't focus on that. So I'm not going to name any area. But basically, carefully assess your situation, okay? And ask yourself this question: will taking your eyes off what you're focusing on now to solve this new problem lead to a much bigger and threatening problem later? So you may have decided that, okay, I'm going to focus on this area of my life. I'm going to, spend my time in the evenings when I come back from work. I'm going to invest 2 hours or whatever it is to do this, or all the money that we save, this is what we're going to use it to do, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, right? You have a plan. So you want to grow a particular area of your life. And you said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend time with my children and just sit down every day after work and just blah, 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 blah. Okay? So that's an example. You have a mid to long-term plan of how you want to build something. And there's something that seems to be urgent, that's saying fire, 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 comes up and shows up. And you're like, and this thing, remember, will require you to take the resources, whether it's the time, the money, the headspace, or whatever it is, from this long-term plan that you have to divert it to go and put out that fire. The first question I'm asking you to ask yourself is, if I take my eyes off what I'm building now, what I'm focusing on now, in order to solve this new problem, will it lead to a much bigger and threatening problem later? And I'm going to show you from the Bible how this happens and how you can apply it to your own life as well. So it's the story of Jesus and Lazarus. And I'm going to read from John chapter 11. It says, so 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Talking about Lazarus. But listen, it says, when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of Man will receive glory from this. So Jesus was like, okay, I can see this fire that has popped up. They say, fire, fire, fire. Lazarus is sick. Come now, come now, come. That's what they were saying. It wasn't FYI. It wasn't, okay, Jesus, FYI, Lazarus is not very well. No, they were like, come now. Oh yeah, healer, be coming now. Come and heal him. Because remember, when Jesus showed up later, both Mary and Martha said, if you had been here, So they were basically saying, come now. But Jesus didn't go. Why? Because Jesus assessed the situation, and I'll show you something shortly. He assessed the situation, the fire that had been started, and he said, I know where this is going to end up. All right? He's not going to die. Okay, it might look like this thing is just going to, Jesus said, and the only way you can really operate by this is if you constantly ask the Holy Spirit to open your eyes. Because the truth of the matter is, when things pop up in our environment, you need something called foresight and also insight to be able to know that, no, even though people are pressuring me, even though everybody say, do it now, even though people are saying, this is the best opportunity, you need the Holy Spirit to open your eyes, to know that, no, I'm not, no, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, but no, thank you. To say, I know that you're saying, everything in my head is saying, go and do it now, urgent. But if you have the ability to be able to see by the eyes of the Spirit, and this is available to you, it's available to me as sons of Most High God. Okay, so don't say only Jesus had it. No, I have it. You have it. Just ask the Holy Spirit. Okay, so if you need to take an hour to go and sit still somewhere and say, Holy Spirit, I know that this thing just looks urgent. I know that the pressure is much, but what should I do? Should I stay back, or should I engage in this thing? Develop that kind of habit. So Jesus looked at the situation with Lazarus, even though the alarm bells were going one. They said, come now. He said, no, I'm not going. Because it says that he stayed in that place where it was for the next 2 days. He looked at it and said, even though it looks extremely urgent, but don't worry, this problem is going to fizzle out. Okay, everything is going to be fine. Without me immediately jumping in to solve this problem, it will still end well. Jesus had that kind of foresight. He had that kind of insight to be able to judge that matter and say, I don't have to get involved at this stage. And I know that everything will still work out right. As a leader, you need that. You need that. In fact, something like allowing people to make their own mistakes, because at the end of the day, it's going to benefit that person more to make that mistake and learn from the mistake rather than jumping in to help them. So Jesus had that. Now listen to what I'm saying here, where I said if you jump in and you go and help, it could actually create a worse problem later on. He says, finally, Jesus said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea, to where Lazarus was. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago, the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Do you know what Jesus spent those 2 days 2 days that he stayed behind doing? He was literally winning the battle over the trap of Satan. Satan was ready to kill Jesus. He would have killed him prematurely. So if Jesus had rushed out to go and put out that fire of Lazarus being sick prematurely, Satan would have killed him. And I'm not going to go into all this. If you read the rest of it, Jesus said, when you're in the light, nothing can happen to you. But if you're in darkness, if you step out, they will catch you. He said it. He said, listen, I needed this time to break into light concerning this situation. Nobody can touch me now because I have settled it in my heart that it is not yet my time to die. There was a bigger problem hiding behind that problem. So if he had rushed out to say, Lazarus, I'm coming to save you. And then he went. Do you understand? They would have just garaged him and killed the guy before, mobbed him, stoned him, when he was supposed to have died on the cross. So there was a bigger problem lurking, and with the help of the Holy Spirit, Jesus was able to see that, no, I'm going to let this particular fire burn, because there's a bigger fire at the end of it if I try to solve this particular problem. And that's what Jesus did. So that is the first thing. The second way that you can be more strategic in problem solving is this. Carefully weigh your options and don't start something that you know you are unlikely to finish. Carefully weigh your options and don't start something that you know that you're unlikely to finish. And when I say know that you're unlikely to finish, it may not come to you automatically. You may need to sit down, take a day and say, okay, this fire is raging and everything inside me is saying, go for it, go and do it, go and solve the problem, blah, 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 blah. Or people are pressuring you. You may need to sit back and say, will I finish this thing? Listen, that I'm about to start. Do I have what it takes to be able to finish it? Because remember, the firefighter mentality prompts people to always jump in, start something and never really finish it because they keep jumping from fire to fire. In Luke 14, if you know me, if you hear me, you will at one point hear me quote this scripture. It's one of the most profound scriptures in the Bible, one of the most profound things that Jesus said. Everything he said was profound, but me, I just love this one. Luke 14, Jesus said, don't begin anything until you count the cost. He says, for who would begin construction of a building or a tower without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it. So this might actually present itself in the form of opportunities. So this fire might be an opportunity like, oh, let's do this. Oh, let's do that. Oh, let's do this. And then you just sort of jump on board without first of all thinking, do I have the time? Do I have the resources? Do I have the money? Do I have the headspace to commit to this thing? If it's no, don't do it. Don't do it. Because remember, it is not meant for you. Be honest. It might even be a thing of season. It may just be that season. Honestly, it may just be that season. Wait until the next season. When the seasons of your life change, that opportunity, if it's yours, it will still be there waiting for you. But do you know why you shouldn't just jump into things and leave them half done? People say, but at least I'm trying. No, because you will leave behind a string of failures. And that in itself is not good for you, because it will just keep reinforcing the fact that, oh, I never finish anything. Oh, I'm never really good at anything. Do you understand? You don't want to leave behind a string of failures and unfinished projects. It's not good for your self-image. You will see yourself as someone that dabbles, as a dabbler, that you never finish anything. And do you also know why this is extremely important? Not to just jump on something. So someone comes and say, oh, there's something happening. And you say, oh, I'll help you. But without you, without really considering it, that, oh my God, you've said yes, you will help the person. Or yes, I'll take on this project. Or yes, I'll do this for you. Or yes, I'm going to do this. And then you realize, oh my God, how am I going to ever do this? I have so much going on in my own life. I have so much going on in this area that I've committed to already. Then you realize that, it's either you do a shoddy work just to get it done, or you disappoint the person, or you disappoint yourself in something that you commit to. That's not good. Jesus said, don't do it. Count the cost first. So be the person that will say, give me a week or give me a day, however long you need. Let me go and think about this. Let me count the cost. Will I have the time? Will I have the space? Will I have whatever it is to be able to commit to this and to finish strong? The other reason is, if you don't have the resources to bring it to a satisfactory conclusion, you were never meant to do it in the first place. It is not every opportunity that God sent your way. It is not every opportunity that God sent your way. There was a time when they wanted to go and force Jesus to become king. Just said, king, go, king, ni. And he just said, no. He said he hid from them. Because he was not anointed to be a physical king here on earth. He probably would not have lasted a week. Somebody somewhere would have just removed a sword somewhere and killed him. Do you understand? He was not anointed to be king on earth. So he's like, no, thank you. And he ran. He hid away. He ran away from the person, from people. Let me read the scripture to you. Romans 12 says, in his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. Oh my God, I love that scripture. He didn't just say do certain things. He says do it well. There's a grace upon your life to do a certain thing well. It's not everything you can do well. There's someone that will do it better than you. So be humble enough to say, well, I don't want to disappoint you. I want to help you. However, I'm not the right person for the job. And how do I know I'm not the right person? Because I've counted the cost and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this properly. So let me just, politely decline and free up the space for someone that will be able to do it well to come into your life. That's we have to look at it like that. It says, so if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you're a teacher, teach well, etc., etc. It's basically saying, find your lane, stay in your lane, and there's grace there waiting for you to be able to do it well. If you keep jumping onto lanes that God never called you to, you will not finish. And even if you finish, you won't finish well. You just do it anyhow, and you wouldn't really shine in that particular endeavor. Not every problem that comes into your space is yours to solve. Seriously, I'll give you a very trivial example, but it's a powerful example. I'm the kind of person that I love things in their place, right? I don't like to spend mental energy looking for things because it drains me. If there's something missing, I will not rest until I find it. Even if I'm not going to use the thing until a year's time. The fact that I don't know where it is, my mind is not, I must find that thing. That's why I must find it. So when I got married, and my husband likes to just keep things in different places. He'll come back, put his keys here, put his wallet there, put his ID card here, and in the morning, oh, he now say, hey, have you seen my keys? Have you seen my, and me in the early months of marriage, I used to get very agitated because I'll be like, oh my God, you can't find your keys. Oh, you're going to be late. And I'll be helping him look for it. I'll be running around. And the person that's looking for it, the keys, the person that owns the key, that owns the ID card and the wallet, he's relaxed. He's like, oh, he's just strolling through the house trying to look for it. Me, I'm agitated. I'm like, oh, where is it? You'll be late. Because I don't like not knowing when things are. After a while, God said, hey, you will just go and quench for nothing. You better. He taught me, he said, no. This is not your fire to put out. Waka pass. I'm telling you, God told me waka pass. Waka pass. Right? Because you handle things in a different way. To him, he will always find it and he will never be late. But you have worked yourself up in a frenzy, right? Every single day. Imagine for 5, 15, 20 minutes every day, getting to high stress levels because I'm looking for my husband's keys. So after a while, I trained myself to not fight the fire. So when he says, have you seen my keys? No, I've not seen it. And then I tried to help. I said, why don't you, every time it come back, I created a space. I said, just put it here so that every morning you know exactly where to go and find it. But hey, he never did it. So I just walk past. Have you seen my keys? No, I haven't seen it. And I've gone. I've moved on. As in, it doesn't affect me anymore. Because I know, like Jesus said, listen, it will not end in death. Even though Lazarus died, he knew that at the end of the matter, Lazarus would be fine. So I knew that he would be fine. By experience, I had learned that he will be fine. He will find it. He will never be late. But me, I would have become so stressed that it could even ruin my own day because I'm like, oh my God, I feel so stressed. So I'm like, I just walk past. I haven't seen it. And that's the end of the discussion. He knows that he won't ask me. If he says once, have you seen it? And I say, I didn't see it. I think the last time I saw it, it was blah, blah, blah. And that's it. That's it. The third one, prioritize by ranking the problems or the things that come into your space based on the value they will ultimately add to your life. Okay? So don't just automatically say, oh, this thing is happening. So especially if you have different things that pop up at the same time, right? There's only one of you. And you remember your goal is to do something well, to finish strong. So instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to do everything at the same time, I'm blah, 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 just think of it. Which one is more important? Which one is going to add the most value to my life? Okay? If you do this, you will easily realize that sometimes you've just got to let some fires burn. Why? Because if that one fire fails, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. And that's what Jesus was teaching Martha when he said that. Let me read that in Luke chapter 10. He says that Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. So she came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But Jesus replied, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about right now. Mary discovered it and it will never be taken away from her. Meaning in that particular situation, Mary had recognized that even though there's cooking to be done, even though there's this, the most important activity that deserves and requires my time, my effort, my headspace, etc. in this moment is sitting at the feet of Jesus, because that's what's going to ultimately add the best value to my life. And guess what? The other one, if they didn't eat, it was not the end of the world. It may have meant that they'll eat a bit later, or people will go home hungry and go and eat in their house. It was not the end of the world. So it wasn't like somebody had died. Do you understand? It was just food. And was Jesus saying, oh, don't spend time cooking? Did Jesus not go to people's houses and they cooked for him? Many times. Did Jesus eat? Yes. So food was important, but in that moment, if they didn't eat, if they spent all night just feeding on what Jesus was saying, it was going to add much more value, and they were not going to die from not eating in one day. Do you understand that? That one is pretty straightforward. And the last one is very simple. The fourth way to be more strategic in your approach to problem solving. So this is particularly for a situation whereby, let's say, a particular area of your life, things keep popping up, but you only ever just cut off the leaves, and then you wait until it comes up again. So like I said in the beginning, it could be finances, where you know that, okay, rushing to go and do this. Why don't we, between the time between the fires, between the crises, what can we put in place, okay, to actually deal with this thing? And the fourth one is, be the tortoise, not the hare, right? And you know the fable about the tortoise and the hare. So it's basically that the hare, who is very quick, was always ridiculing the tortoise, who is very slow. So because the tortoise became very tired, of the hare's arrogant behavior, what did he do? He decided to challenge the hare to a race. All right. So they started the race, and boom, like Firefighter, the hare just, sprang into action and ran. Right. So he he leaves the tortoise behind, and because he's so confident of winning, halfway through he decides to take a nap. Like, see, he's even only 2 inches away from the starting line. You're never going to get there. Let me just lie down here and take a nap. So basically, everything has to be high energy. If it's not high energy, if it's not boom, 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 then I'm not interested. That's the firefighter mentality. So he takes a nap, but when he wakes up, he finds that his competitor, the tortoise, has actually slowly but steadily arrived before him. So what does that mean? Don't allow emotional triggers get you off that slow but sure path that's going to lead you to victory. All right? That's going to lead you to victory. So, for example, someone says, I want to, in fact, this is something I heard someone say to me once. Not about me. They were just talking generally about their own life. And they were basically saying, this one of, let's save 10%. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. Me, I'm only interested in the big deals. All right? I'm only interested in big opportunities. Not, 10%. It was even, very recently, we're friends from university and we're talking, etc. Like, no, I'm only interested in, this, the big deals. I would just save 10%, save. And I look and I said, but you do realize that there's so much evidence, particularly in finances, that if you actually take this slow and steady approach, that you end up being a millionaire compared to only ever looking for big deals. Right? And then you say, I'm only looking for an opportunity that's going to give me 100% return. But you never find that opportunity. And even when you do, because it's too good to be true, you lose money. That's what I'm saying. Emotional triggers. Slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. There's no way around it. And I'm going to finish this off by giving you a final example from my own life. When my husband and I got married, I've shared this before. I'm very open about these things, not because I like sharing these things, because I'm a very private person, but if it's going to help someone, so be it. We had issues around parenting because we had completely opposite parenting styles. All right? And basically, it was at first the firefighting mentality. So when something happened, it was like, boom, there's explosion, like argue, but I don't like the way you do it. And then we found out that the fires were getting more and more frequent, where it's supposed to be 10% versus 90% of no fires. It was gradually from 10% to 20% to almost every week or twice a week, there's something happening that causes an argument regarding parenting. So we decided that no, this is not how we were raised. This is not how Jesus raised you. This is not how Jesus raised me. So let us go back to how Jesus raised us. And we decided, listen, slow and steady. So we devised a plan. We sat down, we said, let us go to the root of this matter. Let us invest time, as in sustained amount of time. Just that. So it's not, you don't only deal with the matter when there's an explosion. if there's no explosion in times of peace, it's actually the best time to build in between the explosions, because by the time the next explosion or the next fire comes up, it doesn't burn with the same intensity. Why? Because you had been doing something in between. But a lot of people only deal with things when there's a fire, and in between they do nothing. So we decided, okay, even though we at the point of saying we're going to do something about this, we don't yet see eye to eye. But the important thing is, at least we're going to gradually get to the point where we will see eye to eye. And even if there are fires or conflicts along the way, the intensity was getting progressively smaller until to the point where we were in full agreement and all the fires were out forever. So that's what I mean. I hope that's helped you. And I will see you next time. This has been Olawunmi Brigue. Thank you and bye.